FAA will be requiring that, I don't know if it's all aircraft, but specific classes, or is it all classes of aircraft to have ADS-B?
Not all classes. It will be, you will be, it's performance-based, so if you don't have the equipage, you won't be able to fly in that segment of the airspace.
Okay.
But if you want to fly like you do now in VFR conditions, you can fly, through probably 90% of the country, VFR conditions without a transponder now. But in the areas that where you'd be intermixing with high-density traffic or with commercial transport aircraft, ADS-B will be required.
What is, you said VFR?
VFR, Visual Flight Rules.
Okay, so that's like the rules of the air?
Yeah. So you can either be under Visual Flight Rules or Instrument Flight Rules.
Okay.
It doesn't matter whether, if you're in visual flight conditions, then you can fly in either VFR or IFR. If you're in the clouds, you have to be under an IFR clearance. Yeah. So you have to be flying via your instruments. Yeah. But in a situation where you're flying in a visual environment, you don't, there are lots of places in the United States you don't have to talk to an air traffic controller. You can just fly and have a good time, and that will endure in the way Next Gen is set up. That will endure as we move forward, and it should endure because there should always be an opportunity for people to be able to fly their airplanes, without having to be under the constraints that are associated with the air transportation system, working with the FAA under an instrument flight rule environment, etc.
They just have to know how to stay away from the...
That's right. There are rules, and they have to comply with those rules, but the rules are based on your ability to visually see certain things. Yeah. And so if unmanned aircraft in the future are going to be able to fly in those regimes, they're going to have to be able to have an equivalent level of safety that there is with a manned aircraft, where the pilot can look out the window and see something. Yeah. So somehow or another there has to be some sort of a technology advance that allows an unmanned aircraft to operate just as safely as a manned aircraft in those environments. And if not, they won't be able to fly in those environments. Yeah. So if we don't solve some of those technical challenges, then unmanned aircraft would only be able to fly in areas where everyone is either ADS-B equipped, or there'd be some constraint that would make up for that. But if they're going to fly in an area where an airplane can be flying around under visual flight rules, not talking to air traffic control, not broadcasting where they are and what their intent is, then the unmanned aircraft will have to be able to interoperate in that environment in a safe manner, just as safe, at least as safe as manned aircraft. Yeah. So until we solve some of those technology barriers, and in some cases they might be policy or procedures or infrastructure barriers, but until the whole set of constraints is solved so that they can fly just as safely, they won't be able to access that. And that's the state of the art now. That's why aircraft are segregated, is because we haven't solved some of those technical problems, or procedural or policy. It's not just technology.
It might not be necessary to have a conventional pilot operating UAS in the future. Of course, either way, you'll still have to be trained, whether you're a conventional pilot or not. Does it seem like future UAS operators won't have to have conventional pilot training and certification?
So a lot of that remains to be seen. A lot of the research going on now, and a lot of the, so certainly for NASA, our US pilots are pilots already, and then they're trained to become UAS pilots. So they have that experience. But understanding what the nuances are of taking the pilot out of the cockpit is really important. And that's going to help determine, I think, in the long run, what the pilot training requirements are. In the DoD, each of the agencies has the authority to handle it differently. In the Army, you don't have to be a certified pilot to be able to fly an unmanned aircraft. And a lot of their unmanned aircraft are, hand launched by the troops on the ground, and then line of sight they fly the airplanes, and so a lot of that is done. Maybe you don't need a pilot. The Air Force is, they're flying a lot of Global Hawks and Predators, and so their pilots are all trained as pilots before they become trained as unmanned pilots. So I think that the jury's still out. I think that there definitely will be a different skill set for an unmanned pilot than there is for a manned pilot. But to the level of training and how much of the pilot training for a manned pilot would have to translate over to unmanned, I think is yet to be determined. And that's a big area of research that the whole community is interested in. And it's part of the reason why we have a large effort on the human systems integration side, which includes the pilot and trying to understand what the differences are between a pilot that's flying a manned in the cockpit and a pilot that's off board. And I think those are really lofty questions that need to be answered by research.